While it's true that early on, digitizing tools were tied to the stitch types that you wanted. So if I wanted a satin stitch, I was selecting a column type tool. That's not the case anymore. You're pretty unlimited with what multi-stitch line element you want to create and what multi-stitch line stitch type you might want to assign to it. So your choice of tools really depends on how you want to digitize and the process that you use. Let's look at the column 1 tool, which works in pairs of points. And as you create those pairs of points, you are at the same time dictating stitch direction. I have on screen columns.bmp that's located in that graphics folder that's loaded with the designs that's loaded with your software. And I'm going to select from my input toolbar, I'm going to select the column 1. It's the one that has kind of the little bars going across it. And if you don't know what something is, you can hover over it and a tooltip will pop up. If it's not popping up, most likely it means that your window doesn't have focus. So I'm going to select that tool by clicking on it. The default properties are going to pop up, or at least the most common ones, and I'm going to leave them there for now. And column 1 works in pairs of points. When I'm digitizing with them, I think of railroad tracks. So I'm going to kind of tie those two lines together, have a line come across them, and I'm going to start with this vertical here, and I'm going to start at the end, and I'm going to begin with a left click, and then I'm going to come across. I'm going to hold Alt to constrain that angle, and left click again, and that creates the end. So I start one side and then I go to the other, and that creates my end, and then I'm going to continue in pairs of points. Now since this is just a rectangle, I only need 2 pairs. Here, and I'm holding Alt again to constrain that angle. Here, and I'm going to press Enter to complete the shape. And now I have a column 1. And it's got the underlay is being populated automatically. My densities populated by the defaults. My stitch type also the default. And if I go into 3D, you can see that it's that nice smooth satin stitch. I'm going to change the color so that we can look at the lines. Now, if you were to add lines across here, it's going to add them in pairs. And if you edit them, you are going to, even if everything lines up, so my vertical is still totally vertical, my stitch direction is being determined by those pairs of points. And I'm going to delete those. Typically, I like to digitize with as few points as possible. It makes editing much, much easier. So that's relatively easy with this rectangle. Let's move to something a little more difficult. This curve. I'm going to start on one end. And again, I'm starting with left clicks. If you don't like what you've done, you can hit backspace and it will delete the last point that you entered. So I'm going to put that back in there again. And here, I'm going to right click to create a curve. I'm going to do that again here. And then I'm going to come all the way down here and left click for my end, left click on the other end. So side A, side B, side A, side B, side A, side B. Press enter to complete the shape, and we're good to go. So I'm going to put this up here. And notice how I have those pairs of points. This is where I'm going to do it in a vector line so it stays on my artwork. I think about how those pairs of points line up. And I think about how the stitches are going to fan across the form. And that's what I do with my pairs of points. So I think of them almost like spokes on a wheel. I want them coming out from kind of a central point so that those stitches fan across the form. If I needed more points, I could add them. I would tend to have them kind of divide evenly. Now, what often for some reason, you will see is as digitizers are going along, they feel like they need to kind of help the curve, and they'll start leading, and then they start getting these kind of really weird stitch directions, and then they get to the end, and you get this kind of twist, which if you're looking for something like this to play with the light, I kind of get it. It is going to pull your fabric a little bit. You may not want to do that. What you may want to do is have the stitches fan a little more evenly, and to do that, think about those pairs of points being like spokes on a wheel. So this bottom example where it's kind of leading the stitches across the form is going to be a little bit problematic. So let me delete that and let me do that again. So as I do those pairs of points, left, left, right, right. And if I'm not dead on, I'm not super concerned. Left, left, enter. If something's a little less even, let's go over here. If something's a little less even, that's fine. I can do the same thing. Left, left, right, right, left, left. Now here, I'm kind of spokes on a wheel again, coming out from that center point. I didn't get this edge as lined up as I would like. If it's a little bit and I want to go back in and edit it later, I would hit enter. To complete the shape, I would take it out of 3D, and then I would select it, and then I would edit it. And oftentimes you can do it by editing the line or the Bezier handles, depending on how you want to approach it. You could have added points. That was a straight point. Let me undo that. I'm going to right click and add a curve point. You could edit with points and more handles, but I'm going to delete that. It's going to delete its mate as well because it's pairs of points. And let me straighten that back out. I held Control to arc that out perfectly. I prefer to edit with as few points as possible. It just makes editing a little bit easier. Okay, so let's look at this S and see how we might deal with this S. And this too is where I would consider taking a vector line if you have it. If not, print it out, draw across it just so you have a better plan. Kind of think about where you want those pairs of points to be and where you want that transition from a straight point to a curve point. Where are those sharper transitions? So I'm just using a vector line to draw across my artwork. Now I do a lot of this in my head now, but starting out I did a lot of it on paper. And here I can see kind of the center. I might kind of divide that, something like that. And then I would probably divide that again. Just to give myself a little bit better guidelines. And now if I wanted to digitize it, I could grab that column 1. I could start here, left, left, and this is a curve, so right, right, and the guides don't start curving until I get that next point in here. There we go. So I'm just curving around the form, right-clicking for every curve. Here I'm going to left-click to kind of straighten that out. Left-click again. Come down, right, right, and continue on with the right clicks until the end. And here I'm going to left click and left click. Then I will hit enter to complete the form. And because I planned that out, those stitches are fanning very, very nicely. A couple of things to be aware of as you're digitizing. Again, be careful that you are one side and then the other. What you will sometimes see people do is swap that, and then you get this kind of bow-tied effect. That's going to get really thin stitches. It's not going to fill up what you think it should. That's what happens when you swap the order of your pairs of points. So be careful. Do side A and then side B. And you get to choose which is side A and which is side B. For something like this, can I do it? Yeah, absolutely I can. Would I want to? Probably not. For something this uneven, I would normally choose probably a column 2, because for every transition, here's one, so left click, then I'd have to come up and left click again, just because I have to have pairs of points. I can't just only do it where there's a transition, which is what's nice about column 2. I would kind of have to figure out how to transition this. Right click, here's another one, left, right. But what I like about this is I don't have to have the same on each side. Here I have a left, here I have a right. But this is a lot to think about and a lot of planning for stitch directions. If I do it as a column 2, I can do it later. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm not going to worry about this one so much. I would probably do this with a complex fill or a column 2. I don't think I would normally do it with a column 1. It's a lot of thinking. So I'm going to delete that. There are easier ways to handle that. Here, could I do this in a column 1? Yep, absolutely. This too, I would consider taking a line and kind of dividing out my pieces. Where am I going to start these curves? Where am I going to end them? Here's kind of the center this way. Here's kind of the center this way. Well, I'm a little off. Let me delete that. There we go. And then maybe something like this. And I'm just trying to divide up those curves a little bit so that when I get my tool and I'm ready to go, I can start with a left click. So I'm doing inside and then outside. Right, 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 right. And then here, I may have to try a couple different combinations to see if I go all the way up and then try to hit the next one. I don't know that I can do it. Yeah, that's definitely not the curve I'm looking for. So if you end up with stuff that you don't like, backspace until you get to a point that you still do like it, and then maybe try to divide it up a little bit more. And here I'm just continuing on with right clicks. Missed a little bit on that one. It's okay. And notice that the curves continue to change as I'm doing it. I don't like that one. Let me backspace. Left, left, and now if I want it to end on the inside, I can hold Control and hit enter, and it will exit on the opposite side that it normally would. So normally it exits on whatever side you click last. If you want it to exit on the opposite side, hold Control when you hit enter to complete the shape, and it will swap that exit point. If you forget, just move your exit point. You can always drag those around. So now we get to slightly more complex shapes. How do you handle these? What do you do? Well, I can't do them all in one element, so think about dividing them up. Let's Maybe you have a piece like this, or two pieces like that. There are also different ways to handle the top part of the A. So you can give yourself guides. If you're comfortable with it and can do it on the fly and do it in your head, that's fine too. So let me grab that column 1 again, and let's look at doing this E. And there are different schools of thought to this. You could do the middle part first and kind of tuck it under and then go over the top of it. You could do the middle part last. I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start down here, and I'm going to left click, and I'm going to go all the way to a transition, left, left, come up, left, left, and I'm holding Alt to snap those to those nice 15-degree increments. In this case, they're 90-degree increments. I'm going to press Enter to complete the shape. Now, I just sewed from the bottom to the top. My stitches are fanning. If I want to edit those stitch directions, I can add points, pairs of points, and move them around to change those stitch directions. If I want to change the outline, like here, what I may choose to do is put pairs of points at that transition and then balloon this out just a touch. And that's going to create a little bit of overlap for me so that if I exit here, then I can do this piece, one side, then the other, one side, then the other. And what this does is it allows it a little bit of overlap so that you don't have a gap in your stitching. Now, one thing you want to be careful about when overlapping stitches, if you have stitches that are perpendicular to each other, they can pull a little bit of a gap. So just watch that. So instead of doing that, I kind of butt up to the stitches, but I don't overlap them. So here, left click to start. You could try to turn the stitches around this bend. And that could work for you. It does get a few short stitches. It does get some kind of funny stitch directions. You could edit those. Other things that you could do, you could come all the way up to here and then travel or move your entry point of your next piece and then have another column come down. I might have it overlap just a touch, but that creates kind of a cap, and depending on the size of the letter, you might be able to do that. Of course, you would want to come back up and finish that crossbar. Or you might do somewhat of a miter, kind of a split between the two, where you kind of come up to here and then fan out a bit. And then for the top part here, you could come kind of down the middle and then quickly jog over. And then come the rest of the way down. So you could do it in 2 pieces, you could do it in 3 pieces. But you'd probably want to Move your exit point back up to here so that you can finish that crossbar. And I'm going to give it that little bit of that overlap that we saw with the E. I'm going to edit that back in. Press enter to complete the shape. And so there are several different ways to make that transition for the A. Pick the one that's going to fit your application the best. Column ones provide you a way to create your shapes and control the stitch directions at the same time. They don't have quite the flexibility that perhaps a column 2 does, where you don't have to have the same number of points on each side, or complex fill where you just trace it and give yourself stitch directions, but you can do things in fewer steps and they work really well for kind of rectilinear shapes.